The psalmist wrote a beautiful psalm in Psalm 33. I'd like you to hear this. I'm just going to read it. It's a little long, but just hang in there and read this along with me. The psalmist writes, From heaven the Lord looks down and sees all mankind. From his dwelling place he watches all who live on earth. He who forms the hearts of all, who considers everything they do. No king is saved by the size of his army. No warrior escapes by his great strength. A horse is a vain hope for deliverance. Despite all its great strength, it cannot save. But the eyes of the Lord are on those who fear Him, on those who hope in His unfailing love, to deliver them from death and keep them alive in famine. We wait and hope for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. In Him our hearts rejoice, for we trust in His holy name. May your unfailing love rest upon us, our Lord, even as we put our hope in You. My opinion is when Esther woke up that morning, maybe for the first time in her life, she understood the power of one. She looked in the mirror rightly, maybe for the first time, and said, I am not here by accident. God put me here, made me, shaped me for this very precious and powerful time, and maybe He'll do something through me. That's why when she walks in, she doesn't do anything. Did you notice that? I mean, her only action that day was just to get dressed. She put her clothes on. She said, you know what? I'm just going to walk in there. Didn't say a word. God's going to have to do something here. I would have loved to sit there and been sort of inside her brain for a few minutes. She'd probably stand there forever thinking, God, if You don't do something, God, if You don't do something, it's my head on the platter. She really believed that God had to do something. So the kind of person that God uses, one, looks rightly in the mirror. The second thing, let's talk about the story. She walks in, she stands there, the king looks up from, I don't know, he's playing Parcheesi or something. He looks up and sees the queen, and he says, here's the royal scepter. I'm going to let you live. You can imagine there's part of a little sigh of relief there. I mean, half the battle's been won. I mean, I dig that. She just woke up and was like, I'm still alive. For most of us, then that's what we can hope for every day, right? I woke up today, I'm still alive. I'm still here. I'm half the battle. So she's still alive. And then the king says, Esther, you've risked your life today. And nobody has the guts to do what you just did. You just walked in, you laid your life on the line. It must be some sort of big deal going on. I mean, there must be something pretty big if you want to come in and risk your life. He says, you know what? You please me, whatever you want. Okay, I mean, that would be pretty cool. The king just like threw open the door and said, all right, anything you want, you can have. Now, if this were John, I would immediately go into my spiel. But it's not John, it's Esther. She does something quite interesting. I want you to see the one thing that she asks for when the king says, whatever you want, it's yours. Check this out. Esther chapter 5, verse 4, she says, okay, if it pleases the king, let the king, together with Haman, he's the second in command, the guy who just pushed through this law to destroy her, to kill her and her family and her entire nation. She said, if it pleases the king, let the king, together with Haman, come today to a little barbecue I prepared. You're kidding. The king just said, do whatever you want. I mean, ask whatever you want, and you just invited him over for a barbecue. I mean, that must be some serious barbecue. She comes over. The king and Haman come over for the barbecue. They're enjoying, it's probably some sweet baby back ribs, maybe a little barbecue brisket. They're just having a grand old time. The king in the back of his mind is thinking, there's got to be something more. He's enjoying the whole dinner thing. Just before the cheesecake comes, he looks up and says, hey, before I bite into this cheesecake, and by the way, it's looking really good, Esther, thanks for the cheesecake. He says, is there something you want? Ask me anything that you want, Esther. I'll give it to you. You know what Esther does? She says, oh, king, would it be okay if you guys could come back tomorrow and we could do this whole thing over again because this was sweet? King looks at Haman and then looks back at Esther and says, that's what you want? She says, sweet, I'll come back because that barbecue brisket rocked. That's all she asks. The second time. What does this tell us about Esther? It tells me about Esther that the first thing on her mind was how to show love. Her first response here was, I need to make sure that every act, every action, every move I make is completely saturated with love. That's my second point. The kind of person that God uses to bring about great change, family, neighborhood, nation, etc., is a person who is completely saturated with love. The kind of person that says, what is the absolute most loving and unselfish thing I can do at this moment? That's the kind of person that I will use, God says. In the New Testament, a guy comes up to Jesus, and he says, Jesus, would you boil down the Bible for me? He says, if there's only one or two things that I could do that would please God, that would make me right with God, if there's only a couple things I could do, Jesus, could you just tell me what those things are? Jesus says, sure, easy. I don't even have to think about it. Matthew chapter 22, he says this, love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind. He says, and the second is just like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus says, here's the most powerful thing that you can do. You can be a person saturated with love. God's eyes are moving all over the entire planet. He's looking for one. What kind of person is He looking for? He's looking for a person who is saturated with love, who asks the question, what is the most loving and selfless thing I can do at this very moment? We love to quote Romans chapter 8 all the time. Every time I get in a difficult spot or difficult situation, I want to whip out Romans chapter 8, verse 28, which is what? What's it say? And we know that in all things God works together for the good of those. Okay, so some of you got this one. This is a good one. Anybody familiar with this? Okay, good. A couple of us, right? It says, and we know that in all things God works together for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. So when I hear people use this, it always starts this way. I know that somehow God's going to work good. He says in all things He's going to work good. But that's really not what God said. He put a condition on there, didn't He? He said He's going to work, all things are work, He's going to work together for good to those who what? Who love Him. To those who are saturated with love, powerful things take place. God says, I'm looking for someone like that. Right now, I'm going to turn that neighborhood upside down, but I'm waiting for somebody who's saturated with love. I'm going to mend that family. I'm going to do something so powerful in that family right now, but right now I'm looking for somebody who is saturated with love. John chapter 13, Jesus said, by this all men will know that you are my disciples if you what? Jesus' last night with His disciples, kind of boiling it down for Him, guys, said, listen, you want to watch the world change, become saturated with love. 1 Corinthians chapter 2 says, it is written, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who... Yeah. I think by her actions anyway, Esther appears to be somebody who's saturated with love, asking herself the question over and over again, what is the most loving thing I can do? Well, at the end of the second night of the meal, the king has gone through the brisket again. He's gone through the, baby back ribs. He's downed a couple quarts of baked beans. He's maybe thrown down a little bit of coleslaw. I mean, he's been enjoying this barbecue, right? And she pulls out the cheesecake again. And just before she's ready to dish up the cheesecake, the king says, whoa, listen, you have been so generous to us. I mean, these last 2 nights of barbecue have rocked. And maybe there's nothing else that's stirring inside, but if there's anything that I can do, would you let me know? And then Esther replies. I want you to see what she replies. In chapter 7 in the book of Esther, she falls down on her knees before the king and says this, if I found favor with you, O king, and if it pleases your majesty, grant me my life. This is my petition. She says, O king, would you let me live? Fortunately,